Hello, I'm your host Direct, and today we'll be taking a look at what to play in Season 26 on which map against what enemy comp. This is a tournament guide, which means this is not a guide for people who play competitive Overwatch, except if you want to transfer what you learn in this video over to competitive Overwatch. This is more for tournaments in each rank. Starting us off, we have our overall tier list of heroes which are good and bad right now. Note that this is the competitive, not the tournament tier list, and this differs in tournaments. So this is the tier list we've established in our Stylosa tier list is bad video. I have a link to that in the iCard up in the corner or in the description below, if you want to see my reasoning on why I put what character where. Next up, we will be going over each and every comp. So there is Brawl, and I will be giving you the positives and negatives of each comp, and also when to play that comp, on which maps to play that comp. So starting off, we have Brawl, where we have Reinhardt and Sigma in the S tier, followed up by, as you can see, the characters down below. So how these tier lists are organized is that the tiers are there to show you which character is most viable. The tech choices are the picks you would go on specific matchups or maps. And then there is, in Brawl, there is the meme category, which is for Orisa, because we have seen some Brawl play Orisa Reinhardt. And last but not least, there is also like a not so good category for heroes that are not so good right now. And then there is a category for why you would even play this character in this comp. So Brawl is usually played right now with a Reinhardt and Sigma, meaning a double shield, but you go aggressive on close range. You can swap out the Sigma if needed for a Zarya to support your Reinhardt even more. There's also the possibility of a D.Va if there's high grounds you need to contest. Then there is one of the more stronger characters right now is McCree with his flashbang and hitscan capabilities. Then we have Brig as our main support that is going to support our Reinhardt in the Brawl, and a Baptiste to throw a lamp so nobody dies. Other options would be Zen because of his Discord orb right now. Then there's the classic brawlers like Reaper, Mei, Doomfist, and Hanzo, which have not seen buffs in a while and are not that strong right now. The strongest characters right now are, of course, hit scans and some characters that can hard sustain themselves. Then there's also Ana, which is a choice made sometimes if you need that anti-nade, or if you want to support your Reinhardt even further with an Ana boost. For the tech choices, the Hog is there for a dive matchup. If you're running into a dive team, you can go Hog with his self-sustain and his high damage burst potential. There's also the argument to be made that you could play a Winston instead of the D.Va, or a Ball instead of the D.Va if you wanted to go for that route. There's also the options for flanking characters, and or Sombra if you're running into problems regarding Ball. And then there is split characters like Pharah and Echo, which off angle and deal pressure on their own, provided with a Mercy, because without a Mercy they're not that strong. Echo, of course, can be played alone. Then there's also like snipers if you wanted to go for a more split kind of Brawl style with half of your team going aggressive while the other half stays in the back line sniping targets. Lucy is not so good right now because, as I explained in my previous video, he is quite outskilled by every single support in the game. Similar things go for Moira, as she does not provide any utility to the game right now except for raw damage output and healing. She's outclassed by every single support and should not be played in tournament play. There's also characters like Junkrat, Soldier, and Torbjorn, which don't really find a place inside of that brawly kind of style. Torbjorn maybe because he got some shotgun capability, but that's all he has. There's also Bastion and Symmetra, which don't see play at all. You could play Symmetra technically to port onto a point, but at that point you could also just play anything else. So what are the positives and negatives of this comp? The positives is that this comp is very easy to run, especially in ranks Plat and below, and can be played by most teams in rank Plat and below because we have always been playing Brawl. Brawl was the first comp ever invented and therefore has always been played. It is pretty simple to just stack a whole bunch of heroes on top of each other and run it down mid. Brawl is quite flexible in its hero choices, having many variations and many different types of Brawl. We saw, for example, a 3-on-3 Brawl together, where you would play Reinhardt, Zarya, and Ana as a 3-stack, and then another 3-stack consisting of Lucio, Sombra, and Doomfist. This is just an example, but there's many capabilities and different flexible comps of Brawl. What is it negatives? The negatives of this comp is these comps are usually only as strong as their weakest link. If somebody misplays or does bad plays all the time, your comp is going to fall apart since you need every single part of your comp. For example, if your main tank dies, then it's over. If your off tank dies, there's not enough support for your main tank or not enough capability to contest high grounds to win the fight consistently. Another downside is that this comp always lacks at least one key component. Either you cannot contest high grounds, or you cannot reach your target in time, or you don't have enough sustain or enough poke or enough burst damage to actually win a fight. There's always one component missing, therefore this comp is not that good in higher ranks. Also, if you play into that missing component, then you're going to lose the fight. For example, if your comp that you have selected, that is because it's very flexible, you can choose your heroes all the time, right? If your comp that you have selected cannot reach the bunker, you are going to lose the game. So you need to swap your comp off. Same goes, for example, if you're playing into a very divey comp that rotates a lot around you and you don't have movable characters to follow them or have sustainable characters to hold their ground if they need to push into you, then you're lacking that component and you're going to lose that fight. Next up, there would be dive. So the question I wrote above, is dive the best ball composition? Maybe. The positives of dive are, of course, its high mobility and very quick kill potential. So we see characters with high mobility such as Brawl and Tracer, as well as Echo and characters like Genji being played, but there's also some characters which can pop off on their own, such as snipers like Ashe and Widow, having a bit of more split kind of dive. You can also go for a more like 3-and-3 kind of style, where you go with 2 snipers and a Zarya. The Zarya is there to bubble the ball or the Winston right now, making his engage more safe. There's also a capability to play a Sombra and Doomfist if you want to go very dive, or if you have like you could also go Nano Blade. That's why the Genji and the Ana are in tech choices. Characters that are not so good right now in dive are, of course, Baptiste, because he cannot really reach all the heal targets he needs to reach because everybody's playing split right now. Same goes for the Lucio. The Lucio like doesn't do as much right now. I've explained this earlier. And then there is characters like McCree and Soldier, which of course are nice hit scans to have, but do not have the mobility or the capability to sustain themselves on their own, such as the Ashe and the Widow can. D.Va and Winston are only in the B tier because D.Va is very much outclassed by Zarya right now, and Winston is very much outclassed by Brawl right now. You could play a Winston Zarya kind of comp instead. You could also opt for the D.Va. It depends on what your team wants to play. I've opted for this tier list. Of course, the positives are its high mobility and quick possible rotations using their mobility. You can always overwhelm a single target by diving on top of it. This is very strong against comps, for example, like Bunker, which are very immobile, or comps which are playing very split, so you dive a singular target and it dies very quickly. Its negatives are that the comp is, as well as Brawl, only as strong as its weakest link. If your monkey doesn't play perfectly and gets outclassed by the enemy team, he does not get bubbled in time, for example, or your coordination as a team is not good enough, because one of your people isn't that good at the game, then once that person dies, your weakest link dies, your team comp is gonna start falling apart. Another downside for this team comp is that it's very reliable on the high grounds, because all the dive characters cannot really sustain themselves on their own except for characters like Brawl, which means that if you don't have a high ground, you have to use a lot of resources to get to a high ground, which means you don't have the resources you need, so you are very dependent on it. You are very dependent on those high grounds. For example, on maps like Numbani, first you have these high grounds, you want to set up on these high grounds and dive down, you never want to dive up. Same goes for points like Dorado first, or things like Numbani with the jump pad. And not Numbani, I meant Oasis, I'm very sorry. Oasis with the jump pad. Next up, this coordination, this comp requires a lot of coordination and team play. What I mean by that is, if you don't have enough coordination, if each and every one of you isn't consistent enough on calling out their dives or calling out their targets, also target focus not being perfect, you're going to lose fights because you need this coordination and team play in order for the comp to work. Next up, there would be Bunker. So Bunker is very weak right now. It was very strong in the beginning of the game, but Bunker, if not played at the highest level of play, is very weak. You see, Orisa, Sigma, and Baptiste are must picks in this comp. You have to pick those characters. If you don't pick those characters, the comp doesn't function. Then there is the optional supports being Brick and Zen, and everything else below that is kind of your choice. There's also the tech choices of Junkrat, Mei, and Sombra. Sombra, of course, to counterpick, Mei if you need the wall, and Junkrat if you're playing something like Anubis first. Characters which are not so good right now are Torb, Symmetra, and Bastion. Of course, Symmetra can be used for TP on Hanamura first, as an example, but the character is usually not played. Same goes for Torb and Bastion, which are not that good right now. Although Torb has nice armor, he just gets absolutely obliterated by characters like Echo right now. So there's no really a point to play him. Also, hit scans are very strong right now, and Torb is not one of them. The positives of this comp are that you can fortify at a faraway location and poke damage your enemies until they die before they even get to you. This is why, for example, Bunker is a counter to Brawl. It's because you can set up very far in the back and start shooting at them before they can even reach you. Somebody might already be dead. Another positive of this comp is that there's many strong heroes inside of this comp. So right now we have, for example, Brig and Zen and Baptiste, as well as Sigma being super strong. Same goes for characters like Ashe and McCree, which are quite strong right now, and Echo. You can all play those characters in this comp, and they're beneficial to this comp, which is very good. Now, there's a lot of negatives to this comp, which is, like the other comps, a comp is only as strong as its weakest link. Meaning that, for example, if one of your players does very bad plays and does them consistently, you're going to lose a lot of fights because you cannot clutch 5v6s with this comp. Another downside is that all ST heroes are required, so if you do not play Orisa, Sigma, and Baptiste, the comp is not working. Next, there is one mistake from these ST heroes and it might be over, because you need to perfectly cycle every ability in your kit between these three heroes in order for the comp to work. You need to put up your Orisa shield. If the Orisa shield goes down, you need to somehow bridge the time with, for example, a Sigma shield, and then when the Sigma shield is gone, you need to bridge the time between the next Orisa shield. So the Sigma needs to use either his kinetic grasp, or the Baptiste needs to use his lamp, and these cycles are very important, because if you don't do these cycles well enough, then you're going to get poked out, you're going to get spammed out, you're going to lose your fight because somebody's gonna die. The most damage going onto Orisa cannot be blocked by a Fortify anymore because Fortify is not that overpowered anymore as it was before. With damage being so high, these flimsy low HP shields go down quickly, so you need to cycle more often and you need to cycle more perfectly. So the coordination between the ST heroes is the key to success. Lastly, I would like to say that Bunker is most worthy on the maps where you can hold a high ground position or a faraway position with long sidelines. For example, you can very much play Bunker on every singular map where there is a high ground far away from the enemy team, which is a benefit of this comp, of course. Next up, there is the question of if you just lock Brawl, you win, and you know, the answer is yes. You want to play around Brawl as much as possible because he is the strongest character right now. He's the only character which can get CC'd multiple times and still survive. For reference, I would still like to look at the last video where I talked about the capabilities of Brawl and where Stylosa kind of made a point that every single character right now is only in their spot at the tier list because of their capability to counter Brawl. So if you want to see more of why this comp is so good, you can look at the last video. Again, it's in the iCard above and in the description. Next up, there would be characters which are compatible with Brawl. Because you want to play Brawl because it's the most powerful character, you of course want to get the maximum value out of Brawl. There's two types to play this comp. There's either to play very split or as to play together and coordinate with Brawl. First option to not coordinate and be very split is the stronger one right now. We see a lot of Sigma going on objectives, holding that objective, and we see a lot of Hogs flanking. We also see Tracer and Echo doing their own stuff, and Zenyatta as well as the other support being kind of behind or with the Sig in a 3-stack alone. While the rest of the team is flanking, of course. The other capabilities of this comp is maybe to just play around the ball, in which case you would go Zarya, you would go bubble the ball on his engages and then engage together with the ball. The Tracer and Echo have great follow-up onto the ball dive, and you might get quick kills because of that Discord orb. Other comps with ball include snipers. So we sometimes see Widows and Ashe and McCree's. So all the hit scan characters which are quite strong right now, we see them oftentimes with ball. Your other support options for this comp are either the Brig if you wanted to go more split, then you would have a Brig together with the Zen trying to protect the Zen while also providing health packs. Or you would go Baptiste if you were to run a Sigma type comp in order to Immortality Field whenever needed. Your tech choices for this comp are Sombra to counter enemy balls and dives. There is Genji with Nanoblade if you wanted to play it. And then there is Mercy. Mercy is an option here if you want to pocket the Echo to get even more value out of her. The Ashe pocket is not needed anymore as she cannot one-shot, but is still nice. For the not so good options, we of course have characters like Neva, Winston, which are just worse than Brawl, worse than Sigma, and worse than Zarya, so you don't quite want to play them. There's also the capabilities of Hanzo in his Storm Arrows, but Hanzo doesn't see that much play since he's not a hit scan. There's also Doomfist, but Doomfist is kind of hard gapped on every single possible location, every single map, against every single character. So we don't quite want to play Doomfist right now. He's very weak. There's also Pharah, which of course is only playable if you play the Mercy, which makes your comp already kind of weaker. And then there is characters like Soldier and Lucio, which don't do enough right now. So the positives and negatives of this team comp are that there is no real teamwork required. You don't need to coordinate anything. Usually everybody just does their own work. The only thing you need to coordinate is when you would start a fight and when you would end the fight and where everybody would play. This is not teamwork related because everybody is going to play on their own anyways, most of the time. Another positive is that this comp requires you to play the most valuable heroes possible right now, which makes it a lot more stronger because you have that capability of playing the most valuable heroes. Then the comp has a very flexible playstyle. You can either go for a high movement / sustain kind of like combination. You could also just go for a more stabilized kind of comp style together with the Sigma, or you can go for a more flanky approach with the Hog. There's many possibilities how to play this comp, and this is why this comp is so strong right now. Next up, there would be that the negatives of this comp are only that the ball player has a lot of pressure, so most of the team's pressure is going to lie on the ball. If the ball doesn't make plays, the team cannot really follow up onto them, and that individual skill is important. So if, for example, one of your teammates is not as good as the rest of them, this can really drag your team comp down. Every single one of your players need to be very skilled individually to pull this comp off because you're not reliable on the rest of your teammates. The rest of your team cannot bail you out because you're very split and because you're not going to be playing in each other's side lanes. This is, for example, a positive in each other comp. Since you're quite playing together, you of course can support each other. Lastly, there would be the general counters, where you would say, of course, bunker counters the brawl because the brawl cannot get to the bunker. The brawl counters the dive since the dive characters are quite bad against the brawl characters. Having their high CC and burst damage is very bad for characters like Winston. And dive counters the bunker because the dive can get to the bunker. If you want me to explain this more in depth, you can go to my season 25 tier list video where I explain the same thing for the tournaments. So next up, there's something special with dive, that there is a special combination of dive you can play to counter the Sigma Ball. If you're running into the Sigma Ball type comp, the split gang comp, I called it in the season 25 tier list video, you want to play a Zarya Winston to force off of the Sigma, because Sigma cannot really do much against these characters like Winston and Zarya, and if the dives are timed correctly, the Sigma will most oftentimes die, forcing him off because he's quite outclassed and countered. Other options would be to force off the ball, which would mean that you would have to play characters like Brig and Sombra. In this case, I would recommend you watch my How to Counter series on Brawl, since Brawl is the very epitome of the game right now. It's the strongest character in the game, and you want to play a Brawl as often as possible. But there's of course always counters to Brawl, and I recommend, if you're running into the Sigma Brawl kind of split comp, that you play these characters to force off Sig and force off Brawl. Also, a thing to note is that if the Sigma is outclassed and very countered and the ball is not countered, then this might result in a Hog Ball comp, in which case you would have a hard time as Winston. So to conclude, our strongest comps right now are the ball comp still, because nothing really has changed about the meta. Although all the strongest characters have been nerfed, they are still the strongest characters and are going to be played as such. Then there is Bunker, one of the worst compositions right now, although you can make it work in very high elo and high tiers if you have a lot of coordination. Otherwise, this will not work. You need to play the Bunker perfectly. You need to have very skilled players individually. Then there is the Dive, which of course needs a lot of coordination, therefore not that easy to learn. And then there is the Brawl, which is the easiest comp of all. And if you want to play it, then you do you. It's not the strongest right now, since all the heroes included in it are not that strong individually. And you need to stack your comp, which is not that nice, since you can be off-angled by all the different heroes in the game right now. Like I said, also mostly lacks one key component every time you play the comp. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's 25 minutes long, and therefore we will be having a second part, which will be going up tomorrow. So in the next part, we're going to go over what comes to play on which map. I kind of cut into this already by saying that dive is mostly valuable on comps which have on maps which have high grounds. Brawl is mostly on the flat maps, and then bunker is mostly on the maps with long sidelines. But I will be going over each and every map and what come to play on attack and defense on the singular sections of the map tomorrow. So this will be going up tomorrow. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I also hope this will help you win some more tournaments by having a, I would say, bit of professional, analytic kind of tier list you can use in every single one of your matches. Of course, if you are going to be plat or lower, if your team is plat or lower, you want to be playing Brawl mostly, as the other comps don't really make much sense for you right now. Also, the tier lists don't really apply for you if you are plat and lower, since many of the tier comps require you to play at a higher level. Anyways, I hope you stay healthy. I hope that you will have a nice evening, and I see you in the next one. Smile.